Now, Prime Minister Modi landed in London on Wednesday evening, and this is for a two-day official visit to the United Kingdom. And you see, viewers, this is Prime Minister Modi's fourth visit to the country. And the visit here aims to strengthen bilateral ties with the signing of the long-awaited India-UK Free Trade Agreement as a key highlight. Now, earlier upon arrival, the Prime Minister was received at the airport by UK Foreign Office Minister in charge of the Indo-Pacific, Catherine West, along with Indian High Commissioner to the UK, along with Vikram Doraiswamy, and also present there was British High Commissioner to New Delhi, Lindy Cameron. Now, all three officials welcomed the Prime Minister to the country. Further, Prime Minister also interacted with some members of the Indian diaspora. Usually, it turns out to be a political rock concert wherever Prime Minister Modi goes abroad and he interacts with diaspora. Now, the members of the diaspora expressed joy and admiration at meeting with the Prime Minister, calling the moment emotionally overwhelming.
Incredibly excited. I think India is at the forefront of the global economy and politics as a whole. So, yeah, there's not a better time to be seeing Modi ji in person.
We are looking forward to the trade agreement that is going to be signed with our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. So, wishing India all the best.
मोदी से मिलने की एक्साइटमेंट तो मैं शब्दों में बयान नहीं कर सकता. पहली बार मिलने का मौका मिल रहा है यहाँ पे. शायद इंडिया में भी नहीं मिला. लेकिन यहाँ मिल रहा है तो बहुत ज्यादा खुशी हो रही है. और खुशी इस बात की है क्योंकि वो ऐसे प्रधानमंत्री देश के जो देश को एक ऐसी ऊंचाई पे लेके गए, चाहे वो आर्थिक हो, सामाजिक हो या सुरक्षा हो, चाहे कोई भी मुद्दा रहा हो विश्व में, हर समय आई थिंक ही इज ऑन द टॉप. और सिर्फ एक ही बात कहना चाहूंगा, मोदी है तो मुमकिन है. ये एक नारा नहीं है, ये एक सच्चाई है जो उन्होंने करके दिखाया है.
Now, let's take a look at what's on agenda of Prime Minister Modi's UK visit. First up, the formal signing of FTA between India and the UK. It would be the key highlight of the visit. Remember, the agreement was finalized on May 6th, and this very deal is expected to double bilateral trade between India and UK from the current $60 billion to about $120 billion by 2030. Further, Prime Minister Modi will also hold a meeting with the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and he's going to discuss the bilateral ties between the two countries. Now, the visit will also include India and UK reviewing the progress of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership (CSP). And the other focus areas of the visit would include trade and economy, technology, defense, climate, health, along with education. Now, I'm also being joined by my colleague Kartik Malhotra on the story. Kartik, the big highlight of this visit is the FTA that's going to be signed. You know, it's come after hectic negotiations spanning over several prime ministers of the UK. So, help us viewers understand how does the economic ties, how it's going to boost the economic ties between the two countries, and at present, where does the economic ties stand?
Right, Ishita, I think you put it fairly. There have been 3 prime ministers in the last 3 years ever since, in the UK, ever since, this FTA has been under discussion. We started talks on this FTA back in 2022. And it has taken 3 years. And mind you, 3 years is not really a long time in the context of, let's say, India's discussions with the European Union. It's been more than 10 years since those discussions on the FTA have been on. But India's economy right now is the fastest growing in the world. UK, on the other hand, has grown by just about decimal point, 0.3% or so in the last year. So UK, I believe, tends to gain a lot more than India, with UK products now finding an easier access into the Indian market. Not having said that, I think India also tends to gain significantly because it, in addition to this being an economic or a trade win, this also becomes a strong message to other negotiating partners, including the EU and the US for India right now, where at least the messaging is loud and clear that India is here to mean business. India is here to become the supplier to the world. India is an open economy, a transparent policy framework which attracts investments as well as trade from other countries. Now, coming specifically to your question, we are trading with the UK right now at about $60 billion or so, give or take. This includes India's imports from UK as well as India's exports to the UK. Now, if you look at it as a total percentage of India's total trade with other countries, India ends up exporting, give or take, about 450, 460 billion dollars. UK, the export to UK is at just about 12 to 13 billion dollars. So at the moment, we are talking about UK being, while it is in the top 5 trading partners for India, it constitutes just about 3% of India's total external trade. Now, with the signing of the FTA, and remember, signing of the FTA is pretty much, both the sides formally agreeing to want to go ahead and make this free trade agreement happen. But this is going to be pending approvals from the UK Parliament, which is also something which could take a few days from now. So the point really is that 3% trade with the UK right now, $60 billion or so overall import-export, likelihood for that to double to about $120 billion in the next 5 years is what we are talking about. Now, there are multiple sectors, of course, that get impacted, but it's pretty much the high-value items from UK which will find an access to the Indian market, and India's labor-intensive sectors finding access to the UK market.
Right, as you mentioned that the deal will set the tone for other negotiations that are underway. Now, as you said, it's an all-encompassing deal spanning over several sectors, but we're also given to understand that Indian workers will also get benefited out of this. Help us understand how the workers can reap the benefits out of this deal.
Right. So specifically on Indian workers, Ishita, the point really is that right now, Indian workers who are in the UK, work in the UK on a short-term visa of 3 years or under that, end up paying double social security, which means they are also contributing to their EPFO back home in India and also paying into the coffers of social security for the UK. So one of the highlights of this FTA happened to be the fact that now this avoidance of double social security is done away with, which means there is going to be only one jurisdiction and one country in which Indian workers working in the UK will be required to pay social security. So overall, if you look at it as a part of the total CTC of an employee who is of Indian origin and has gone on a short-term work visa to the UK, the overall in-hand money available with that Indian worker is likely to go up. But having said that, there are certain issues that need to be ironed out, and this also includes what skills and what level of skills are going to be accepted by the UK for Indian educated workers back in UK. So that again is an area of contention right now. There are certain sectors which could get impacted. There are certain job roles that could get impacted by this stringent UK worker visa program which is being instituted right now in the UK, and that is something that India is not in 100% agreement with. So I think there is going to be some ironing out of those differences as well. But coming specifically back to the FTA, Ishita, I think it's important to mention the sectors which are going to get impacted positively, both for the UK as well as for India. Now, if you look at UK, I think the image that really springs out is James Bond, and what are the cars that James Bond has driven across all the James Bond series. So everything from an Aston Martin to a Jaguar to a Land Rover to Rolls Royces to Mini Coopers, etc. These are all UK brands, and these brands will find a more sort of palatable environment for exporting those cars to India, because remember, duties on foreign imported cars in India stand at about 100%. Now with this FTA going through, those duties are significantly going to come down to about 10%. It means anybody in India who has the money to buy the brands I just mentioned will not have to pay as much money as they used to earlier to import those cars. But having said that, there's not just cars. You also have the scotch and the whiskies and the gins which are going to find an entry into the Indian market, and concession is going to be offered on tariffs on those as well. But that is, of course, something that we're talking about, the rich man's world, as they call it. But there's also an advantage for India's own SMEs, India's own manufacturing capabilities, which get a leg up with this FTA. So talk about labor-intensive sectors like leather, gems and jewelry, even agriculture for that matter, textiles, apparels, all of these sectors, pharmaceuticals, these are sectors which are going to find absolutely duty-free access into the UK market. So at one level, it becomes an expansion of trade. It makes India's exports more voluminous and more competitive for the UK especially. And at another level, we are also then looking at more revenue coming by way of these exports back into the Indian market and the Indian economy, and hopefully job creation by way of that. And that is exactly what Prime Minister Modi also mentioned in his tweet that you referred to earlier, that the focus of this free trade agreement and the signing of that is primarily to also boost jobs in addition to everything else that he mentioned.